clothes and put violets in them and put them in the stream to send them off as her missionaries going over to China. She always believed she was going to go to China. And grew up and tried to join an order of sisters and was told no because she was too sick. She had had tuberculosis. When she was 9 and playing by the stream, she had also fallen into the stream and came very close to drowning. And nobody knew how she was pulled out. She always believed it was her guardian angel. And when she, in the aftermath of that, she had tremendous bronchitis. She had lots of difficulty with her breathing, some of which reoccurred throughout her lifetime. She also, as a teenager, developed hemorrhages. When she was 20, both her parents died. The following year, the town was stricken with smallpox. She got smallpox. She had a lot of difficulties. She had a lot of health difficulties. And throughout her life, was very frequently, many times a year, laid flat and could not do anything. And would have high fevers and intermittent fevers. Later in life, she developed malaria. So she had a lot of difficulty, and when she asked to join an order of sisters, she was told no because she was too sick. So she tried again to join a second order, and was also rejected from that. Eventually, she was allowed to join an order that, at best, we would call dysfunctional. The day that she became a novice there, she also became the novice mistress, because she knew more about faith than the people who were leading the order. There were 2 lay women who had provided money to start an orphanage and really had no vocation at all. And for the first 6 years of her religious life, it was really awful. It wasn't just awful because she wasn't getting guidance. It was awful because she was being harassed by the people who were running the order. And to the point where there's stories of when she would be kneeling in front of the Blessed Sacrament to pray, and the superior would stand behind her and say, well, what are you praying about? Why are you doing that? And really harassing her. So it was a very, very difficult time. She's all of her life been leading to this moment of becoming a religious, and it's awful. It's just awful. And she looked back on that, and it was one of the real formative experiences in her life, because she looked at that as the time when she had to lean entirely on Jesus. She had to rely for all of her consolation on him, not on the people around her, not on the people who were leading the order. And that really deepened her faith substantially. She would never tell you that if things are not going the way if they're painful and they're not going the way that you think they should, she would always say that means Jesus is with you. There's a cross in your road. That means Jesus is with you. That's the way she looked at difficulties. So after 6 years, they dissolved the order finally, and she was asked to form her own order, and she was 30 years old at the time. It was originally a diocesan order in Italy, eventually became a pontifical rite order, and remains a pontifical rite order today. It's called the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And the sisters are active still in 17 different countries. They had sisters come through here periodically. I had one last summer who was serving in South Sudan, which is probably one of the most dangerous places on earth. Another sister who just got missioned to Uganda on the border of South Sudan, where they're working with in one of the largest refugee camps in the world. I have sisters coming through who work in Swaziland, which is now called Eswatini, where they started that mission in the 80s during the huge AIDS epidemic, which devastated families. Not just here it was, it was whole families, parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts, and they started an orphanage there. So the first thing she did, she was a teacher, and then began to run orphanages and do other things, and was active for about 8 years in northern Italy. And And then she was asked by Bishop Cabrini, if you know any Cabrini fathers, to consider coming to the United States. But why was that an issue? Remember, she still wants to go to China. This is where she's thinking missionary is China. Here in the U.S., in the decade prior to the time that she arrived, there are over 1 million Italians had emigrated to the U.S. 4 million had emigrated from mostly southern Italy. Many went to South America and Central America, which is why she also ended up going to South and Central America later on. But when they got here, they were at the very bottom of the immigrant pecking order, like the bottom. And they were below the no Irish meat apply. They were below everybody else. And there was huge racial prejudice against them. And because they arrived uneducated and unskilled, they got the worst jobs. And they lived in the worst housing, which meant they had very awful, confined living conditions, which meant that frequently they'd get sick. If there's a contagious disease, they would get it. If there was danger on the job, they were the ones that would be injured or killed. So it was a time when there were few social services, certainly no public social services. And the other thing that was going on here was that there were 7 priests that spoke Italian in all of New York City. So you had lots and lots of people who had no consolation from the church, had huge temporal needs, and so there was a big need for someone to come take care of them. So she went and prayed about it a lot, was still kind of torn, finally went to Pope Leo XIII and asked his opinion on whether she should go. And that was when he famously said not to the east, meaning to China, but go to the west. So she did. And in fact, the year that she agreed to come, she had been given 2 years to live by a doctor. I don't know about you, so I was given 2 years to live. I probably wouldn't get on a boat. And I certainly to go to a country where I didn't speak the language to take care of people in terrible situations. But she did, because that's what God was calling her to do. When she was 9 and had fallen into that stream, one of the consequences of that was that she ended up with a lifelong fear of water, like a visceral fear of water. And in 1889, in order to get to the U.S., there were no airplanes. You had to get on a boat. And you were talking 8-9 days on the ocean in a boat. She would cross the water in her lifetime, across the ocean 23 different times. Never lost her fear of the water. But absolutely, the only reason she get in a boat was because God wanted her on the other side of the water. she had to go through her fear, go over her fear in order to serve God. She was not afraid. The thing she was most afraid of, she didn't come because she wanted to found orphanages or she wanted to found schools. She came because this is what God asked her to do. And when she got here, within a week, she went down to the Lower East Side, which is where all the tenements were. If you watch Gangs of New York, or any of the movies set on the Lower East Side, that's where she was. And within a week, she had started catechism classes for kids. Within a month, had an orphanage up and running. If you have orphans, you have to feed them and you have to teach them. And so then she started having schools as well. She went from here down to Nicaragua, from Nicaragua to New Orleans. She went to New Orleans because in 1891, there had been a huge, one of the largest mass lynchings in all of American history, in which 11 Italians who had the jury had said that they were not guilty of murdering the sheriff, they were attacked in the jail by a mob. provide services to the Italians, and basically turn things around for them. And the sisters are still active down there actually, but at the time there were yellow fever epidemics, and they stayed and just nursed people through that. Very, very powerful service. She did not distinguish between just the spiritual and the temporal needs of someone. You know, when she saw you, she saw your heart, and she saw your needs, and she addressed both. She ended up in the U.S., having institutions, schools and hospitals and orphanages in New York, Newark, Scranton, Pennsylvania, because the miners, Chicago, Seattle, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Denver, and I'm forgetting a couple. But she was all over the place, traveling almost all the time. She also had foundations in England, Spain, France, and Italy, obviously, and in Nicaragua, Panama, Brazil, and Argentina. So she was quite the woman of action, very much grounded in prayer. Very, very much grounded in prayer. She founded 67 schools, hospitals, and orphanages in the course of her life. She would never, ever say that she did it. That was just the fruit of her love of Jesus. It was the fruit of her love for other human beings. She had a heart, she led with her heart, and she only wanted her heart to be aligned with what Jesus wanted of her. And that is how she ended up doing what she did, even though she was very frail. So she is the patron. She died in 1917, and there's in the room over here. There's a little video, a 4-minute video that's in English and in Spanish about the miracles that led to her canonization, which is pretty powerful stuff. And she was canonized in 1946, and this is the 75th. This past summer was the 75th anniversary of that. So she was the first U.S. citizen to be named a saint ever in all of history. And it was a big deal. It was the first canonization after World War II, so that was also a big deal. The day that she was canonized, the line to get in to visit her relics, this building wasn't here then, obviously. Her relics were in the school building that's next door. And the line was so long, there were 45,000 people that came in one day to venerate her relics. She's a wonderful human being, a wonderful saint. Any questions?
Thank you.